Hey everyone, before I start my story, I need you to stick with me to the end because what I'm about to share isn't something you'll hear every day. And maybe someone out there has gone through the same thing and can finally tell me I'm not insane. If you're new here, hit the follow because I'll be uploading more details, more proof, and maybe, just maybe, the truth will come out one day. My name is Daniel. I'm 34 years old. And up until last year, I lived a completely ordinary life in a small town in Pennsylvania. I worked 9 to 5 in an insurance office, drove a beat-up Honda, and my biggest worry was whether the roof of my rental house was going to survive another stormy season. I never believed in aliens, UFOs, abductions, or any of that late-night conspiracy crap you see on TV. But what happened to me in late September of last year changed me forever. Started on a Tuesday evening. I remember because I had stayed late at work to finish a report, and by the time I drove out of the parking lot, the sun had already set. I usually took the main road back home, but that night I decided to cut through a back road that runs along a stretch of forest. It's about 7 miles of cracked asphalt. No streetlights, no houses, just trees on both sides and sometimes the occasional deer crossing. I had my windows cracked open, radio humming softly, and I was thinking about what leftovers I had in the fridge. That's when I noticed it. A light in my rearview mirror, brighter than headlights, and far too high off the ground. At first I thought maybe it was a drone or a helicopter flying low, but the light didn't move the way it should have. It wasn't bouncing or shifting. It was locked on me, keeping the exact same distance no matter how fast I drove. My stomach tightened. I told myself I was being paranoid, but then the radio cut out, just dead static, and the dashboard lights flickered like the car was losing power. I tapped the gas pedal harder and the Honda groaned, engine revving, but no matter what speed I hit, the lights stayed there, hovering silently behind me. Then it happened. The trees on the side of the road lit up like it was broad daylight, every branch glowing silver. My car shuddered, and I swear for a second the tires weren't touching the ground. I gripped the wheel, knuckles white, heart pounding against my ribs, and then the light surged forward, overtaking me, flooding the entire interior with blinding white. I tried to slam the brakes, but my body didn't respond. It was like my arms and legs weren't mine anymore, frozen, held in place by something invisible. My vision blurred. The sound was gone. Every noise sucked out of the world until there was only a sharp ringing in my ears. And then darkness. No crash, no impact, no explanation. Just nothing. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in my car anymore. I was lying flat on a cold surface, the air damp and metallic, like the inside of a freezer. Above me was a ceiling I can't properly describe. It wasn't metal, not glass, not anything I recognized, but it shifted colors in slow ripples, like oil floating on water. My wrists and ankles were pinned down by thin bands of light, not straps or cuffs, but something that felt solid and weightless at the same time. Panic shot through me. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My throat felt locked. That's when I saw them. 3 figures standing around me. They weren't little green men, nothing like Hollywood. They were tall, at least 7 feet, their limbs too long, their heads elongated, skin pale and almost translucent like wax. Their eyes, God, their eyes were the worst. Huge, black, and glossy, reflecting me like a mirror. One leaned closer and tilted its head as if studying an insect, and I swear I felt it inside my skull, sifting through thoughts I didn't want anyone to see. I tried to fight, to push them out, but the more I resisted, the heavier my chest became, like drowning in invisible water. I don't know how much time passed, seconds, minutes, hours, but eventually one of them raised a hand and the bands around my arms and legs released. My body floated upward on its own, weightless, spinning slowly as they circled me. That's when I realized they weren't just looking at me, they were experimenting. They lifted me as if I weighed nothing, my body turning slowly in the air while the room around us hummed with a sound that was more felt than heard, a low vibration that made my teeth ache. One of them, taller than the others, with a slight translucence to its skin that showed faint, slow-moving blue veins, placed a hand near my temple. I expected pain. Instead, there was a pressure, like a fingertip against a closed eyelid, and then images flooded my mind without warning. Flashes of places I had never been, maps drawn in light, a coastline I recognized from a childhood postcard that I could not possibly recall. They were taking pieces of me, not stealing but copying, like someone photocopying a page to study later. I tried to focus on something solid, my sister's laugh, the name of my high school mascot, but the images they fed me were stranger. A bird with 3 wings, a city under glass, an old man pointing at stars on a ceiling. I realized then that when the taller one leaned in, it wasn't only reading, it was communicating. Not with words, not with sound, but with a cascade of impressions that carried meaning through feeling. Fear became a color, curiosity a metallic taste, loneliness a cold pressure behind my eyes. In that exchange, I managed to send one clear thing back. My name. Daniel. A human name seemed to amuse them. One of the smaller figures emitted a high, pulsing tone that set the hairs on the back of my neck on end. They didn't speak English, they didn't speak anything I could recognize, yet in that moment I understood 2 things with crystal clarity. They were scientists of a sort, and they were not hostile in the way I had imagined. They were clinical, inquisitive, and disturbingly detached. They probed, tenderly, methodically. My hands, my ears, the soft place behind my knees. I remember cold instruments that weren't instruments, smooth as glass but alive, running along nerves and bone, and each touch sent a ripple through my memory like a pebble dropped into a pond. I began to lose track of myself. Names and dates smeared together. The last time I had dinner became indistinguishable from my 11th birthday. When they examined my eyes, I saw worlds reflected in the blackness of their own. I tried to bargain with them through gesture. Please, home, sister, job, but gestures meant nothing to them unless they were accompanied by the right internal picture. At one point, a small, almost childlike figure held a human photograph up to me, a Polaroid of a man I didn't know. They wanted to see my reaction. I forced a smile, chose the safest truth. The photograph meant nothing to me. The taller one, its attention precise, surgical, seemed disappointed, then curious, then resigned. They stopped the probes, and for a sliver of time the room was just the humming and the slow shimmer of the ceiling. I felt my body again. The bands of light resumed their hold for a moment, then loosened. They didn't set me down. Instead I was guided, unresisting, through a corridor that glowed faintly beneath my feet, past panels that shifted with images of stars I'd only ever seen on postcards in the dentist's office. I tried to memorize the route, but every turn blurred into the next until space itself felt like a memory someone else had borrowed. At one point, I caught sight of something behind a translucent wall. A row of cages, not like animal cages but like small rooms, each with a person curled inside. One looked like a woman I'd once seen on the news, another like a boy from a missing person poster plastered to a lamppost near my town. My chest slammed with the realization that I was not the first. The tall figure noticed my gaze and quickly turned away, a movement so swift and precise it was almost embarrassed. They wanted to keep me from seeing that part of their work. They returned me to the central chamber. This time they didn't restrain me. Instead they asked, through images, a question about desire. What do you want? I thought about screaming, about being back in my Honda, about the warm light of my kitchen. What left my mouth in a dry, useless whisper was a single, human answer to be believed. They recorded that, in some way I couldn't map, and then something changed. The taller one touched the side of my head, and for the first time, not as an intrusion but as an offering, a memory came back whole. My father's hand on my shoulder at a train station, telling me to take care, his voice warm and thick. Tears burned in my eyes, and the creatures watched me with something I can only call attention, not cruelty. They seemed to catalog emotions the way a librarian catalogs books. Then, without fanfare, a corridor of light opened and I was inside my car on that back road. The engine ticking as it cooled, the moon a thin coin above the tree line. My watch said 2 hours had passed. The road bore no skid marks, No debris, nothing to explain my absence. My phone was in my pocket, full of missed calls from my sister. 2 of them within the hour I remembered being taken. I stumbled out of the Honda, knees buckling, and the light in the sky, far less dazzling now, receded over the treeline like something embarrassed, as if they too were trying to be careful not to leave proof. I drove home in a fog, half convinced I'd dreamt the whole thing, until I noticed the faint, round scab on the inside of my wrist and the smell that clung to my clothes. Ozone and something floral I couldn't name. My keys were where I left them. My front door was unlocked. Inside, the clock on the wall read a time that matched my watch. Nothing in the house had been touched except for a thin ring of dust on the floor near the couch that, when I leaned closer, revealed tiny interrupted footprints that phased into nothing, as if whatever made them had been weightless. I wanted to call the police, but what would I say? I was abducted by aliens? The rational part of me. My job, my bills, the man I'd been for 34 years, was already working to rewrite what happened into something acceptable. A blackout, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion, a prank. I slept that night on the couch, fully clothed, lights on, and dreamt of those glossy black eyes. In the morning, my phone was full of notifications. My sister asking if I was okay, a weird local Facebook post about a bright light spotted over the county, and a message from my boss asking why I'd missed an important meeting. When I tried to replay the night in my head, I hit walls of amnesia. Large gaps, as though someone had clipped scenes out of a film. But there were fragments I couldn't lose. The feeling of being weighed and then unweighted, the taste of copper when they probed my mouth, the photograph of the stranger, and the witness of the cages. I also had a new, impossibly clear sense that I had been altered, that something inside me had been copied and taken away. I kept thinking about that question they'd asked. What do you want? To be believed. I never imagined that wanting something so human would knot me together with beings who cataloged emotions like specimens. I didn't sleep well for days, and every reflective surface in my house. Windows, the black screen of my TV, the chrome of the kettle, felt like an eye waiting to see if I was different. I started to notice small inconsistencies. A bruise on my hip in the shape of a crescent, my dreams filled with a humming tune that, when I hummed it in the shower, made the water vibrate oddly. My phone's battery would drain faster than it should, and sometimes, for a fraction of a second, signals would overlay on one another. My music and, under it, a whispering tone that faded when I reached for the volume knob. I knew I had to prove it, to make something tangible that would force others to accept what had happened. I recorded my speech to the camera of my laptop, hands trembling, voice rough. I said their name, Daniel, and I said that I'd been taken. The file saved. Later, when I tried to play it back, the audio was there, but between my words were pauses filled with those same images. The coastline, the bird with 3 wings, the old man pointing at the stars. The more I looked for proof, the more the edges of those proofs blurred, as if the world itself resisted testimony. But I found one solid thing. A smear of something on the inside of my jacket pocket. Under my bathroom light it glowed faintly, not with color but like a residue that caught light differently. I took it to a lab, then to another. The results were inconclusive, labeled organic atypical, which did not help. When I told the first technician about my story, he smiled politely and said, "Sometimes stress does strange things," and then asked if I'd consider counseling. I wanted to scream that what I needed was not therapy but witnesses. I needed cameras pointed at the sky, corroborating reports, someone else who'd been inside those cages. And then, 3 nights later, while I was scrolling local news, I saw a post that made my stomach drop. A blurred dashcam video from a trucker 3 towns over, showing a pulsing, triangular craft hovering silently over a field. And in the comments beneath the video, someone wrote, "My cousin went missing here last month." The cousin's face in the photo was familiar in a way that tightened my throat. The boy from the missing person poster I'd glimpsed through the translucent wall. They posted the trucker's dashcam footage to a local group that night, and within hours the clip had been shared 100 times. I watched it on my phone until my eyes burned. An impossible black triangle hanging above a cornfield, lights pulsing like a slow heartbeat. No sound, no navigation lights, then a shimmer and gone. Comments swirled between ridicule and genuine alarm. I messaged the uploader, a man named Roy, and he responded with a terse, "You seeing this?" We met in a diner the next afternoon. He was larger in person, hands like the steering wheel, eyes tired. He told me he'd been out on Route 9 when the object hovered over a field for maybe 2 minutes before zipping off. "Made my gauges jump," he said, tapping his chest. He hadn't stopped. He'd filmed because his dashcam never stopped filming. We compared notes, the timestamps, the direction of travel, the shape. When I mentioned the missing boy photo, Roy went pale. "That's near my route," he said. "We get lots of weird at night. Fog, lights, hunters. But this is different." He took me to the field. It was the kind of place you expect mystery. Wide open, bordered by a whisper of trees, nothing but earth and sky and the quiet hum of insects. In the grass there were flattened circles, concentric like small, deliberate landings. Up close the soil had a glassy sheen to it, as if rain had frozen and fused with the earth. I collected a clump in a sandwich bag with shaking hands. That night the local station ran the dashcam clip and interviews. My face appeared briefly in the background as I argued with Roy about whether to call the sheriff. The sheriff's response was polite skepticism and a memo about wildlife activity. People who didn't want to believe labeled everything a hoax. People who had missing family members closed ranks. Eyed me like someone who'd gone too close to a wound. I started meeting other families. Mothers with missing children, husbands whose wives had vanished from bed, a man whose brother had walked into the corn and never come back. Each story had different details, different towns, different clocks, but an identical thread. A light too bright, a silence like the air had been put in a jar, a hole of time. We tried to organize a watch. We set up cameras on tripods, night scopes, an old pair of binoculars that had belonged to my grandfather, and for 3 nights we sat under the stars in folding chairs, coffee going cold, shivering but alert. The first 2 nights were nothing. The sky was ordinary. Planes, constellations, a satellite blinking its patient way. On the 3rd night, something came. It was subtle at first. A low pressure against my eardrums, like the onset of a storm. Then the lights, blurred at first, then painfully bright, appeared beyond the tree line. The hair on my arms stood up, not from cold but from recognition. People chattered and cursed. Rex, a farmer with a face like weathered leather, swore he felt the hairs on his head lift. The object moved with impossible slowness, then stopped as if reading our group like a page. I raised my camera and everything in the viewfinder went white for a heartbeat. Then, in the wash of exposure, I saw a shadow shift inside the glow, an outline that matched the proportions I'd seen in that freezing room. My legs went rubbery. Someone's thermal camera picked up heat signatures clustering in a pattern. Stepping across the field, too many legs, too tall. We heard nothing. A woman beside me started to sing, softly, halting, an old hymn to keep herself from sobbing. The craft tilted and a beam washed the ground where we sat. Phones died in hands. One by one the people slumped, not asleep but absent, eyes open and blank. I fought it. I grabbed the arm of the man next to me and shook him until he coughed and came back. We ran then, not away so much as toward the road, heart hammering, breath heavy, stumbling over the uneven ground. When we stopped at the treeline, the craft was gone. On my phone there was video, a smear, streaks of light, then static. But when I played it back later, the faces in the footage had small, dark marks at their temples like bruises, and my own voice in the audio track had a second track underneath it. A thin, high-frequency sound I could feel rather than hear. The next morning, the local paper ran a piece called Mass Hallucination, and a podcaster flew in from the city, eager for shock. I went on camera with Roy and a mother named Helen whose daughter had disappeared 2 summers prior. We told what we could remember. Afterwards, Helen hugged me hard and whispered, "They took her patterns, her laugh, The way she chewed her nails, like they collect parts of people. Her voice broke, and I realized how small the word collect sounded compared to the image in my head of rows of rooms and cages. The more we tried to expose what had happened, the more the edges of reality fought back. Devices failed in subtle ways. My neighbor's CCTV had recorded nothing that night, even though it was pointed perfectly at the field. When we checked the footage, the file had a single frame missing from the exact minute the craft hovered. I took that USB to a friend who could recover deleted files, and he stared at his laptop for an hour before saying, "This is odd." He produced a hex dump and explained in a way I half understood that some sectors were overwritten with patterns that looked almost like compressed audio. Compressed audio in video files? He shrugged and handed the drive back. "Weird," he said, like that explained anything. That week someone spray-painted the word liars on the side of the diner where Roy and I had met. My name was on a forum calling me a hoaxer. People I'd known for years crossed the street to avoid me. It hurt in a different way than fear. It felt like they were erasing me because believing would admit the world was not the one they'd agreed to live in. Then, late one night, my sister called crying. "Mom found this under your bed," she said. She read me a list. A tiny, folded paper with words in my handwriting. Only I didn't remember writing them. The list had single items: coastline, bird, old man, glass. At the bottom was a line I recognized like a bruise. "What do you want?" I didn't tell her about the cages. I didn't tell her how sometimes, when I stood still long enough, I could feel a presence at the edge of my sight. A figure watching not with malice but with the same clinical curiosity I'd seen in the chamber. I started leaving small markers, subtle things only I would notice. A scratch on a windowsill, a coin tucked under a loose floorboard, so that if something came and altered me again, I'd have a trail to prove my continuity. For weeks I slept poorly, flinching at every hiss of a passing car. My colleagues noticed the lines under my eyes. My boss suggested I take some time off. I lied about a family emergency. The nights were worst. On the third week after the field incident, I dreamed of the tall one again, but this time it did not probe. It showed me a room beyond the cages. A place hung with things: metallic instruments, jars filled with cloudy liquid, shelves of photographs, some so old their paper had curled. On a table lay something wrapped in cloth. When it unveiled, it was not human, not exactly. A small creature, like a child with too many joints, with skin like cooled wax. The tall being touched the creature's forehead, and a picture flooded me. Endless corridors on dark worlds. A ship that was not a ship but a kind of living map. A purpose I could not translate into language. I woke choking, sweating, and for the first time I felt a different emotion rise in me. Not just fear, but a fierce, animal anger. If they were cataloging us, taking fragments of our lives as specimens, then I would find a way to catalog them. I began carrying a recorder taped under my jacket, a pen that wrote tiny letters on any surface, a camera with a mechanical crank. Old technology that might resist whatever overriding force they used. I started meeting others in secret, swapping tips over coffee and in the back rooms of pawn shops. There was a code to it now. Look for the sheen on soil, the missing files, people who came back different in small ways. Helen's daughter had a small silver ring now, one she'd never had before, and when Helen pressed her, she would only say, "They showed me the ocean," as if memorized on a loop. I knew then that if I wanted answers, I would need to push closer, to make them react in a way I could record, to force evidence into the triangle of shame and denial that other people called the world. So I planned. I collected cameras, gathered ground samples, and mapped the most likely corridors the craft traveled, relying on dashcam times, witness sketches, and the small, telltale burns in the grass. The plan was dangerous: to lure the craft to a place with enough recording devices that whatever happened could not be easily erased. I felt sick with purpose, part scientist, part man who would not be silenced. The night we set the trap, a wind rolled in from the west, carrying with it the smell of something metallic and sweet that made my eyes water. We were 10 people, scattered with tripods and IR lights in a field we'd cleared of brush. My hands trembled so badly I had to steady the camera with my forehead. The minutes stretched. Then the sky opened. A shape slid out of nothing and settled over us. And for a heartbeat everything was as it had been in that chamber. Weightless, inevitable. The craft hung silently above the field, lights pulsing in a rhythm that felt alive, almost breathing. My heart slammed against my ribs, but I forced myself to stay calm, focusing on the cameras, the recorders, anything that would capture this. Then, a beam of light shot downward, spreading across the ground like liquid metal. The people froze, and I felt the same invisible grip on my body I had months before. But this time I fought it, planting my feet, gritting my teeth. The taller figure appeared at the edge of the beam, looking at me directly with those endless black eyes. And for the first time I realized they could see my fear, my defiance, and my insistence on being believed. I raised the camera higher, clicking buttons frantically, recording every flash, every shadow, every pulse. The beam retracted, and the craft moved closer, the light washing over us, and I swore I could see inside it. The same endless corridors, the jars, the photographs, the things they collected, all flickering like film on a broken projector. Then, slowly, they began to fade from the beam's edge, as if acknowledging my persistence. I felt a release in my body, the invisible chains loosened. The craft hovered a moment longer, lights dimming, then shot upward in a silent streak, faster than any human-made object, disappearing beyond the stars. Silence fell. We were shaking, wet with sweat, hearts pounding. The field looked untouched, except for faint, iridescent marks in the grass that glimmered in the moonlight. We checked the footage immediately. It was raw and chaotic. Streaks of light, shadows moving impossibly, distorted reflections of us all. But unmistakably something had been there. For the first time, I had proof that couldn't be explained away. The others hugged, cried, and whispered to each other. I stayed still, staring at the sky, feeling the weight of knowing I had been altered, marked, watched, but also heard. I realized that the experience had changed me forever. I could never be the same man who believed the world was simple. I had a story, evidence, a network of witnesses, and the unshakable certainty that I wasn't alone, that we had been chosen, studied, but not destroyed. And maybe that was enough for now. I returned home, exhausted, but with a sense of purpose. I recorded my final message for the channel. They're out there and they're curious, but we can fight invisibility with persistence. We can be witnesses. Keep looking. Keep recording. We are not alone. And one day, the world will have to believe. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt the faintest brush of cold air across my cheek, and in the darkness of my room, I thought I saw a shadow in the corner. Tall, elongated, watching. But this time, I didn't panic. I only whispered to myself, "I see you, and I will be ready." The hum of the sky faded, leaving me with a strange peace. I was forever changed, but alive, and the story was mine to tell.